The morning Maeve found out she was pregnant, she burned her toast twice and didn't notice either time. She stood in the kitchen of their condo on Elgin Street, staring at the little plastic stick on the counter like it was a word she didn't know how to pronounce. 2 lines. Clear as anything. She picked it up, set it down, picked it up again. Outside, the Ottawa sky was doing what it always did in October, turning that particular shade of gray that couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or not. She was 31 years old. She had a job she loved, a condo she'd bought herself, and a husband named Griffin who had kissed her on the forehead that morning before leaving for the office and said, "See you tonight, love." She called her mom from the bathroom floor. "Maeve?" Her mom picked up on the second ring the way she always did, like she'd been sitting beside the phone waiting. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Maeve said. Then she started crying. Her mom, Deborah, who had raised 3 kids in Kingston and still made butter tarts from scratch every Christmas, said, "Oh, sweetheart," and that was enough. That was the whole thing, right there in 2 words. Maeve didn't tell Griffin that night. She wanted to do it properly. She'd had this idea in the back of her mind for months, since the 2nd year of their marriage, that she'd frame the ultrasound photo and leave it on his pillow. Or make his favorite meal, rack of lamb with roasted potatoes, and slide the pregnancy test across the table like she was playing a card. She wanted the moment to be a story they'd tell later. She wanted to see his face, so she waited. She made an appointment with her OB/GYN for the following Thursday. Dr. Harmon confirmed everything, scheduled the first ultrasound for 3 weeks out, and told her she was about 8 weeks along, which meant this had been quietly happening inside her since August, when she and Griffin had spent a long weekend at his cousin's cabin near Calabogie, swimming in the lake and staying up too late around the fire. She drove home from the clinic with the appointment card on the passenger seat and her hand pressed flat against her stomach at every red light. Griffin was a senior associate at a firm downtown. He'd been working long hours since September, a major development project, something to do with a rezoning dispute that had everyone stressed. She understood it. She'd been with him through 4 years of exactly this. The late dinners, the phone always face up on the table, the way he sometimes answered emails while she was mid-sentence and then looked up and said, "Sorry, what?" She didn't take it personally. That was just Griffin during a file. He always came back to her after. She told herself that now, driving home. He always came back. The ultrasound was on a Wednesday. She'd booked the appointment months in advance. Or so it felt, though it had only been 3 weeks. She hadn't told anyone but her mom and her closest friend, Petra. No, not Petra. She hadn't told anyone but her mom and her best friend Simone, who had hugged her so hard in the parking lot of the coffee shop where they'd met that Maeve had spilled half her decaf down her sleeve, and they'd both laughed until they cried. She hadn't told Griffin yet. She was going to tell him that night. She had the lamb defrosted. The imaging clinic was in the Glebe, on the 2nd floor of a medical building with a slow elevator and a waiting room that smelled like recycled air and hand sanitizer. She signed in, sat down, scrolled through her phone without reading anything. They called her name 20 minutes later. The technician was young and quiet and professional. She squeezed the gel onto Maeve's stomach. Cold, always cold, nobody warned you enough, and pressed the wand against her skin, and then the screen filled with that gray and white static that didn't look like anything until suddenly it did. A heartbeat, fast and certain, like a small fist knocking on a door. Maeve made a sound she couldn't describe. Not a word, just a sound. The technician smiled. "There's your baby." Maeve asked for 2 printed copies of the image. She tucked them both into her coat pocket. She floated back through the waiting room, past the rows of chairs, past the reception desk, down the slow elevator, and out into the pale October afternoon. She was standing on the sidewalk, trying to remember where she'd parked when she saw him. Griffin was across the street. She almost called out to him. She actually raised her hand, halfway up, fingers spread, the way you wave at someone you know. But something stopped her, some small, cold thing that moved through her before her brain caught up. He wasn't alone. The woman beside him was tall, wearing a long camel-colored coat, her dark hair loose over her shoulders. She was laughing at something. Griffin was laughing too, leaning toward her slightly, his hand, resting at the small of her back in that way that is never casual. That can only mean one thing. Maeve stood there. The woman turned slightly and Maeve saw it. The coat was open. Beneath it, the unmistakable curve. Rounded, full, completely obvious. This woman was visibly, significantly, beautifully pregnant, and Griffin was guiding her through the door of the restaurant like she was something precious. Like she was his. The ultrasound photo was still in Maeve's coat pocket. She stood on that sidewalk for what felt like a very long time. People walked past her. A cyclist rang a bell. Somewhere a streetcar rattled. The world kept moving with complete indifference. And Maeve stood in the middle of it, holding a photograph of her own child's heartbeat, watching her husband open a door for another woman's belly. She didn't cry. She didn't go across the street. She didn't do anything dramatic, which surprised her later, because she'd always assumed that if something like this happened to her, she would know exactly how to react. She'd always been the practical one, the one who handled things. Instead, she walked to her car. She sat in it. She put both hands on the steering wheel and looked straight ahead at the concrete wall of the parking garage, and she breathed. Then she drove home and took the lamb out of the freezer and put it back. She didn't say anything to Griffin that night, or the next night. He came home at 9, loosening his tie in the doorway, asking if there was anything to eat. She made pasta. They watched television. He fell asleep on the couch before 10, and she sat beside him in the dark with the volume low, watching his face in the blue light of the screen, thinking about all the things she didn't know. She called Simone the next morning from her car before work. "I need you to listen to me and not say anything until I'm done," Maeve said. "Okay," Simone said. Maeve told her everything. The clinic, the ultrasound, the heartbeat, then the sidewalk, Griffin's hand at the small of that woman's back, the coat, the belly, the restaurant door swinging shut, silence on the other end of the line. "Simone, I'm not saying anything. You said not to say anything until you're done? I'm done." "Okay." A long breath. "Okay. Do you know who she is? No? Do you want to know?" Maeve thought about it. Really thought about it, the way you do when the question is actually dangerous. "Yes," she said. "I think I have to." It didn't take long. It turned out that once you start paying attention to the edges of your husband's life, the way he angles his phone, the numbers he steps out of the room to answer, the vagueness that you'd filed under work stress, you start seeing things you can't unsee. Her name was Vanessa. She worked in the same industry, commercial real estate, different firm. She had an Instagram that was half public, enough for Maeve to see. A baby shower photo from 2 weeks ago tagged in Canada. The comments full of friends saying "so excited for you," and "you're going to be such an amazing mom," and heart emojis, heart emojis, heart emojis. Maeve clicked through the photos slowly, alone at her kitchen table at midnight while Griffin slept upstairs. In one photo, a detail, a dark-haired man in the background, half cut off by the frame, clearly not meant to be in the shot. She'd recognize that jawline anywhere. She'd kissed it 10,000 times. She closed her phone and set it face down on the table. She was 8 weeks pregnant. Vanessa looked at least 7 months. The math of this was its own kind of violence. She needed to be sure. She knew this about herself. She was someone who needed to be sure before she acted, because once she acted, there was no going back. So she did the thing she would have told anyone else was a terrible idea. She contacted Vanessa directly. She didn't do it impulsively. She drafted the message 3 times on her lunch break, then deleted all of them. She called her mom. Her mom said, "Maeve, be careful. Be very careful," she called Simone. Simone said, "Whatever you decide, I'm in the car with you." In the end, the message was simple. She said who she was. She said she thought they had something important to discuss. She left her number. Vanessa called her back in 40 minutes. They met at a Tim Hortons in Nepean, which felt both absurdly ordinary and exactly right. Fluorescent lights and double-doubles, and the two of them sitting across from each other in a corner booth, not touching their coffees. Vanessa looked different in person. Younger, Maeve thought. She had that particular exhaustion of late pregnancy, the kind that lives around the eyes. She looked at Maeve for a long moment without speaking, and then she said, "He told me you two were separated." There it was. Maeve had braced herself for a lot of things. She had not braced herself for that, specifically, the neatness of it, how cleanly Griffin had arranged his life into 2 separate fictions, one for each of them. "We're not," Maeve said. "We're not separated. We live together. We've been together for 6 years." Vanessa looked down at her coffee cup. She had one hand on her belly without seeming to realize it, just resting there, the way pregnant women do, this unconscious gesture of protection and connection. Maeve recognized it because she'd caught herself doing the same thing for the past 3 weeks. "How far along are you?" Vanessa asked quietly. 8 weeks. Something moved across Vanessa's face. Not cruelty, something closer to grief. "I'm 34 weeks, she said. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere behind them, someone was asking for a bagel toasted, please, and extra cream cheese. The completely ordinary sounds of a completely ordinary afternoon, surrounding the two of them in their quiet catastrophe. They talked for almost 2 hours. Maeve didn't cry. She was surprised again to find that she didn't cry. She felt like she was watching herself from slightly above and to the left. This woman sitting in a Tim Hortons in October, learning the full shape of what her marriage had been. When she got back to her car, she sat for a moment. Then she called Griffin. "Hey," he said warmly. "You on your way home? We need to talk," she said. "Tonight." A half-second pause, just long enough. "Everything okay?" "No," she said. "No, it's not." She got home before him. She sat at the kitchen table without turning on the lights. When she heard his key in the lock, she didn't get up. He came in, dropped his bag, saw her sitting in the dark. "Maeve, why are you sitting in the—" He reached for the light switch. "Don't," she said. He stopped. "I met Vanessa today," Maeve said. The silence that followed was the most honest thing Griffin had said to her in months. She watched him stand there in the half-dark, one hand still on the light switch, and she watched him understand that it was over. Not because she said it. Not because she raised her voice. Just because there was nothing left to say that wasn't already hanging in the air between them. He tried. Of course he tried. He said it wasn't what she thought. And then when she looked at him, he stopped saying that. He said he was sorry. He said it had been a mistake that got out of control, which told her something about how he'd made peace with it. A mistake, like a wrong turn, not a year-long decision made over and over again, every single day. She let him talk until he ran out of things to say. Then she said, "I need you to leave tonight." He opened his mouth. "I'm pregnant, Griffin," she said. "I found out 3 weeks ago. I had the ultrasound today. I was going to tell you tonight." She watched that land. She watched him sit down heavily on the kitchen chair across from her, like someone had reached in and taken the bones out of his legs. "Maeve, I need you to leave tonight," she said again. "We can figure out the rest. But right now I need you to pack a bag and go." He went. She called her mom at midnight. Her mom said she was getting in the car. Maeve said, "Mom, it's a 2-hour drive. It's midnight." Her mom said, "I know what time it is." Deborah arrived at 2 in the morning with butter tarts in a Tupperware container and a bag she'd already packed before Maeve called. Because, as she explained, setting the kettle on and not making a big deal of any of this, she'd had a feeling. "Moms always have a feeling," Deborah said. "I didn't want to call you," Maeve said. "I didn't want you to worry." "I know, sweetheart." Her mom sat down across from her and pushed the Tupperware toward her. "Eat something." Maeve ate a butter tart at 2 in the morning in her quiet kitchen, and her mom sat with her and didn't try to solve anything or say the right things or make it make sense. She just sat there, which was the most useful thing anyone had ever done for Maeve in her entire life. Her dad called in the morning. Her dad, who was not a man of many words at the best of times, who had said exactly 4 things about Griffin in 6 years, all of them positive. He called and said, "Your mother told me. Are you okay?" And Maeve said, "Not really." And he said, "That's fair. We're here." And that was all he needed to say. The divorce took 8 months. Griffin didn't fight her on much. She thought later that he must have understood on some level that he had no ground to stand on, no moral high ground from which to demand anything. He asked for the sectional sofa and the cast iron pan, and she said, "Fine, take them, I don't care." She kept the condo. She kept her name, which she'd never changed anyway. She was 6 months pregnant at the first mediation session. She sat across the table from Griffin and his lawyer, and she was enormous and tired. And she had Simone sitting beside her, holding a thermos of chamomile tea, and she signed what needed to be signed and said what needed to be said and went home and put her feet up. Her daughter was born in June. They named her. Maeve named her Wren, 5 pounds 12 ounces, born in the middle of a thunderstorm, which the nurses said happened more than people thought. Wren came into the world loud and insistent, arms going, furious at the lights, which made Maeve laugh so hard. The doctor asked if she was all right. She was all right. She met Oliver the way people in Ottawa meet people, which is to say at an event she hadn't particularly wanted to attend. It was a fundraiser dinner for a community arts organization, held in a renovated warehouse in Hindenburg. Simone had bought the tickets months earlier and refused to give them up even after everything, on the grounds that Maeve needed to leave her condo occasionally, which was true. Wren was 7 months old and staying with Deborah for the weekend, and Maeve was wearing a dress she'd bought 3 years ago, and heels she remembered being comfortable and wasn't so sure about now. Oliver was the person she got stuck beside during the part of the evening where everyone stood around with wine, pretending to look at the silent auction items. He was tall with dark eyes and the particular quality of someone who was genuinely interested in whatever you were saying, not just waiting for his turn to speak. He was a high school art teacher in the West End, which was not what she would have predicted from looking at him, and she told him so. "What did you think I did?" he asked. She looked at him. "Something in construction," she said. "I don't know why." He laughed. It was a real laugh, unguarded, and she realized she hadn't heard that in a long time. A real laugh from someone who meant it. They talked through the dinner. They talked through the dessert course. Simone caught Maeve's eye from across the table at one point and made a very small, very deliberate face that communicated 17 things at once. When the evening ended, Oliver asked if she'd like to have coffee sometime. Maeve said, "I should tell you, I have a 7-month-old daughter, and I'm freshly divorced, like very freshly." Oliver nodded. "Okay, that's it, just okay?" "I mean," he said, "I asked if you wanted coffee, not if you wanted to explain your whole situation to me in a parking lot. The coffee offer still stands, but only if you want." She wanted. They took it slow, which was Oliver's word and also his instinct and also the right thing, and Maeve was grateful for it. They had coffee, then dinner, then a long walk along the Rideau Canal in February, where they talked until their faces went numb from the cold, and neither of them suggested going inside. He met Wren on a Sunday afternoon, 4 months after they first started seeing each other. Maeve had been deliberate about that, deliberate about everything regarding her daughter. And Oliver sat on the living room floor with Wren and a set of stacking cups, and gave her his complete, uncomplicated attention, and Wren grabbed his finger in her whole fist and held on. Maeve watched this from the doorway. She thought, oh, there were hard things. There were days when the weight of the past year sat on her chest like something physical. When she woke up at 3 in the morning in the too quiet condo, and thought about the version of her life that had been a lie. There were moments with Oliver where she felt herself go distant, where she'd catch herself waiting for the other shoe, for the thing she'd missed, for the sign she hadn't known how to read. Oliver never pushed. He just waited. He was remarkably good at waiting. Once, she apologized for it, for pulling back, for the moments of distance. He was quiet for a second, and then he said, "Maeve, you were lied to for years by someone who was supposed to be safe. You don't have to apologize for being careful." She didn't say anything for a moment. "I just don't want to do that to you," she said. "Keep you at arm's length." "I know," he said. "I'm not going anywhere while you figure it out." He wasn't. Wren was 2.5 when Oliver proposed. On the back porch of the house they'd started renting together in Westboro, on an ordinary Tuesday in September, with the maple trees going orange over the fence, and Wren asleep inside after her bath. He didn't make a production of it. He just sat beside her on the porch steps with 2 mugs of tea and said he had something he wanted to ask her. Maeve said yes before he finished asking. They got married the following June, on the grounds of a small inn outside Perth, Ontario, with Deborah in the front row crying the good kind of tears, and Maeve's dad walking her down the aisle with his jaw set tight the way it got when he was trying not to cry too. Simone was her maid of honor. Oliver's sister flew in from Vancouver and instantly became the person Wren followed around all day, which freed Maeve up to actually be present at her own wedding. Wren walked down the aisle ahead of them in a white dress with eyelet trim, dropping flower petals with enormous seriousness, both fists full, one at a time. She made it about halfway before she stopped, looked up at Oliver, and said loudly, in the middle of the garden in front of 60 people, "Daddy." It was the first time she'd said it. The minister paused. Oliver went very still for a second. Maeve felt the whole weight of it, the whole long road of the past 3 years, the Tim Hortons booth and the parking garage wall and the 2 a.m. kettle and the February canal walk and all of it. Compress into this one moment in a garden in June. Oliver crouched down and opened his arms, and Wren walked straight into them, petals still in her fists, and he held her there for a long moment with his eyes closed. Then he looked up at Maeve. She was already crying. He was, too. The 60 people in the chairs were making the particular collective sound of 60 people trying not to cry and failing. "Ready?" he said. She took his hand. "Ready."